Welcome, everybody, to a conversation exploring the living Earth community. Uh, this is a Garrison Institute virtual forum. I'm Jonathan Rose, the co-founder of the Garrison Institute. Before we begin today's session, let's review a few logistical items about our gathering. This is a Zoom webinar, so participant audio, that means you guys, and video will remain off for the duration of the webinar. Please put any questions you have into the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can towards the end of today's conversations. We're recording these sessions, and you'll have a chance to view the recordings, as well as a schedule of upcoming programs at the Garrison Institute. And we encourage you to share this with your friends and on your social media so that millions of people end up seeing this conversation. It is now my pleasure to introduce our two guests, Mary Evelyn Tucker and Tyler Mark Nelson. Mary Evelyn Tucker, PhD, taught at Yale in a joint program between the Divinity School and the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. She directs the Yale's Forum on Religion and Ecology with her husband, John Grimm. She is a pioneer in the field of religion and ecology and expert in world religions. She's published hundreds of articles, co-authored and edited over 20 books, and co-executive produced an Emmy Award-winning film, Journey of the Universe. Mary Evelyn and John have been building bridges between East and West, sharing ideas and aspirations of ecological civilization for decades. And Mary Evelyn is a past board member of the Garrison Institute and is deeply involved in our work. Tyler Mark Nelson is an educator, an eco-theologian, and an artist exploring the ways that humans make sense of their creaturely existence in relation to the more than human world. He currently directs the Living Earth Community Program. That's what we're going to learn more about today. And he earned a Master's of Divinity in Religion and Ecology from the Yale Divinity School. Tyler Mark Nelson and Mary Evelyn Tucker, welcome, welcome, welcome. So I just want to do a brief introduction in that you launched this incredible website that is not a resource. It's both a resource, but more importantly, it's a worldview. It's a perspective on this idea of a living Earth community. And so we're very, very grateful, number one, for that work, and today for this chance to introduce that work to a broader audience, and for that audience to engage with you directly on it. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And I really want to welcome Tyler in this intergenerational handshake, which is so important these days. But I want to give a big shout out to Jonathan for just drawing us into Garrison for so many years and many conferences. But I have to say, this particular shout out is Jonathan was the first to respond when we launched this website. And I was so grateful because he understood it as he understands so many ideas. So we're going to welcome his questions first after our presentation and then yours. So let's do our little PowerPoint here. So I've already been introduced and Tyler has been introduced, but we want to begin with another tribute to the millennia-old perspectives of indigenous peoples who are acknowledged in their lifeways, which embody traditional environmental knowledge. So at the heart of this Knowledge Commons website is, of course, indigenous ways of knowing, kinship, and TEAK, traditional environmental knowledge. And of course, Thomas Berry, our teacher, had this iconic phrase, the universe is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. And that tremendous sense of subjectivity throughout all of nature and the universe itself is also the heartbeat of this Knowledge Commons website.
Now, this Knowledge Commons, the Living Earth Community website, is intended to evoke wonder and awe and to call people to recognize the intricate beauties of this Earth community in which we are but one species among so many others. And the timing of this is also crucial, recognizing that we are living through a mass extinction event. We are facing the realities of climate change. But we're also looking to call people to action for preserving these healthy ecosystems.
So we want to just say something about the origin of this website, which is many, many years, decades actually, in the making. Many years ago, after the Harvard conferences in 1999, we did a conference with Paul Wadeau and Kimberly Patton at Harvard called A Communion of Subjects, using Thomas's term, and his essay is the first one in this volume, which took many years to bring in other people like Jane Goodall and other animal behavior people. So that was the origin of this idea in many ways. Journey of the Universe is also part of the heritage because that assumes that there's subjectivity, interiority, along with communion. So all of that, the film and book, assume subjectivity. We did a conference as well down in Virginia with our former dean, Peter Crane, called Living Earth Community, which is an online book and interviews that we would be delighted for you to take a look at. So this is part of the legacy, part of the launch of this Living Earth Community website.
Now, we're going to plug the website because if you haven't seen it, it is a sight to behold, livingearthcommunity.com. And this is what you'll see when you first arrive, the home screen with navigation bars up top. We've got a blog and so much more information. But Mary Evelyn and I will walk you through this so that you have a better understanding of the Living Earth community.
So here we have the navigation menu, intelligences of nature, ecological worldviews, and Earth law. And you get a feeling for the depth that has been created with 6 members over 18 months, Tyler being a leader of this team. So we also want to pay tribute to the Earth Charter. And I was very fortunate to be part of the Earth Charter drafting committee for a decade, at least, led by Stephen Rockefeller. But here's the spirit of this knowledge commons. Humanity is part of a vast evolving universe. Earth, our home, is alive with a unique community of life. The forces of nature make existence a demanding and uncertain adventure, but Earth has provided the conditions essential to life's evolution. The resilience of the community of life and the well-being of humanity depend on preserving a healthy biosphere with all of its ecological systems, a rich variety of plants and animals, fertile soils, pure waters, and clean air. The global environment with its finite resources is a common concern of all people. The protection of Earth's vitality, diversity, and beauty is a sacred trust. And those lines about the vast evolving universe and Earth is alive, in 97, when Gorbachev held up the first draft of the charter, indigenous peoples were weeping because they felt their worldview was in this charter. So, and also scientists helped to articulate and write these passages. So very briefly, this is the 4 sections. The first one is what is Living Earth Community, with introductory essays. Ecological, intelligences of nature is the next key one, ecological worldviews, and then Earth law. We'll go into those in just a little bit of detail now.
So intelligences of nature really touches on this reality, this vision of the world that we are within a communion of subjects, as Thomas Berry has said. And so while there are different ways of exploring this reality, intelligences of nature looks at the modern or contemporary scientific literature across the flora, fauna, and fungi kingdoms, as Merlin Sheldrake likes to call it. And it explores the inner worlds of these other beings. What is the experience or the expression of life from, say, a stingless bee in the Amazon? Or how is AI technology now beginning to decode and translate the language of sperm whales? So it's drawing together this mode of perception, but also this mode of communication in the science world. You'll see here as you explore the website, we cover all the bases of this community, all the way down to invertebrates, matter, and so on. And when you click on these navigation panels, it'll bring you to many resources. I believe we're at 1,700 on the website alone, and there's a full bibliography that is now passing 200 pages.
And I just want to mention that this New York Declaration on Animal Consciousness that came out of a online conference at NYU was the first time that I saw animal behaviorists saying that the persons that they are studying, if you will, are conscious. And if they are conscious and sentient, they deserve protection. So they came out with this statement, which was advocacy and good science combined, which is very rare. So that gave us a signal. This is going to be the time to launch this knowledge commons. Now, ecological worldviews, I'm sure you're familiar with many of them. We can probably still add more. This is a growing website, but animism, indigenous people's worldview, but animism all over the world, deep ecology from Arne Ness in Oslo. Ecological spirituality is absolutely booming these days. The Gaia hypothesis from Lovelock and Margulis. And there's a Gaian way right now, which I think you will enjoy joining. Living cosmology brings in the work we've done with Brian Swim and so on. Nature religions is more along the lines of what Ursula Goodenough has done, nature-based education and nature therapy, which of course is growing all the time, forest therapy, for example. New materialism is saying this isn't dead matter, this is alive, there's vitality, there's chi there. Pantheism and panentheism are being used in sometimes in the Christian world to describe where is the living spirit, not just transcendent outside, but within. Now, panpsychism is a view that Whitehead had, the philosopher. Some people feel that this is the view that comes with everything is alive and intelligent. The new book that Michael Pollan is just coming out with about consciousness, he's very much into panpsychism, as you will find out. Religious naturalism is really where, Ursula Goodenough, the cell biologist, has worked for a long, long time, and her book, Sacred Depths of Nature, is very important. And again, wonder, awe, beauty, these great feelings of the human, which may even be virtues, which will give us the energy for protection, for further discovery, and for continuing human energy for preserving these ecosystems and species. Now, Earth Law, I'll just say a few words and Tyler will take over, because Thomas Berry, our remarkable teacher, was one of the very first to say, we invented human rights. We invented rights and gave them all to the human. And he said, everything has rights. And he goes through a whole notion of what's Earth jurisprudence. He did this conference when he was way into his 80s. And John and I thought, oh, this sounds great, but is it really going to have traction? Well, it is, and it does have traction, which is what Tyler will explain in a moment. But I just want to say at NYU Law School, there's a program on Earth law. And we just met, Tyler and John and I and Sam King, down at the law school after they had come up here in December, two lawyers, Carlos and Cesar, and they are teaching Earth law. They are right now with the Maori in New Zealand, which is the first river to be preserved from rights of nature. But I want to say in the class that they're teaching with Jackie, another member of the faculty there, they're taking these principles of Earth jurisprudence and having the class make them into law documents. So this is already unfolding in a law school and in many parts of the world. How can we protect ecosystems and species by rights of nature?
Absolutely. And Earth law, as you can see on the screen, covers all continents and all waters on the planet. You could click on any of these and see the innovative legal theories, the challenges to existing structures, the science law partnerships, indigenous-led movements, and so on that are happening within this global movement of Earth law, Earth jurisprudence. What's exciting is that just a week ago, we had a webinar with a student. She is a senior at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. Her class in studying water justice spent one semester, just 5 months or so, understanding what Earth jurisprudence and rights of nature are. And they asked themselves, well, why can't we do this? let's do something. So they began building relationships with local tribes, local neighbors, even the local river, the Animas River. And that name is so telling, the life, the breath river. By the end of this semester, they had presented their case to the City Council of Durango, Colorado, which passed the resolution to recognize the rights of the Animas River. So this story is just one example of so many where there's intergenerational work occurring around the planet between these different sectors and perceptions of the Earth community, but all within that umbrella of Earth law.
So I just also want to say that this Rights of Rivers report is exceedingly important here, but also the Chinese are working on rights of rivers, and they have an extensive report. And one of our Chinese scientist who's working with us has done a lot of work studying what the Chinese are doing for ecological civilization to preserve species and reforest land, etc. So just wanting to mention this critical material that's developing in many parts of the world.
And one note that I forgot to add is the challenge to Earth law that some people bring up is, well, what about human rights? But what Earth law does so well, and what Thomas Berry articulated and so many others, is that human and more than human rights are intertwined, and their very well-beings are connected together.
Yeah. So we are going to actually conclude here with a magnificent endorsement from someone many of you may know, one of our great nature writers and marine biologists, Carl Safina, who teaches at SUNY, Stony Brook. And here's what he says about this Knowledge Commons website. At every level, from the entire universe to this planet, to all living beings now and through time, to your mind and body and the world's collective thinking and beliefs, existence is networks of relationships. I know of no other place on the internet that is a better first stop and launching point for delving deeply into what all kinds of people have learned and thought about, that most basic fact of existence and its radiating ramifications. Beautiful writer, radiating ramifications. That's what we hope it will be for all of you in your work.
And we just want to conclude with a big thank you for your attention, for your visit to the website. Real quick, the URL is livingearthcommunity.com. If you have questions or you are looking for an entry point to this vast knowledge commons, please send us an email at info@livingearthcommunity.com. And then we're also all across social media. We have a very talented team led by Nikki Woods, who is finding ways of crossing this new media landscape to bring these resources to all communities.
You want to say something about the stingless bees?
Oh, yes. So the photo here is the Amazonian stingless bee, which is found in Peru. And just this past fall, there was a resolution in the province or the region of Satipo, Peru, to recognize the rights of this Amazonian stingless bee. Now, this one bee species is so critical to that region that if it were to disappear, not only would we lose a beautiful member of the Earth community, but the entire food system of the Ashaninka people, who are an Amazonian indigenous folk, would completely disappear. Food systems would collapse, as well as the local ecosystems. So here's another great example of where human and more than human well-being is intertwined, interdependent, and Earth law is one of the most exciting movements right now to protect and celebrate this biodiverse planet that we all inhabit.
And maybe one final comment is that we'll put later, maybe in a follow-up email, about NYU Earth Law program that we'll be working with, because they have a whole community of people, and they're very much about community. And that includes people like David Abrams, More Than Human World. Rob McFarland, this beautiful book, Is a River Alive? Of course, Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she was part of our discussion last week at NYU via Zoom, and she wants to be part of the ongoing sensibility of this knowledge common living Earth community. But what NYU Law is doing, they have gatherings each spring. This one, next one will be in London, but it's called MOTH, More Than Human World. And then they have classes, of course, but they have an incredible website with a lot of information that we will share with you later. And their enthusiasm, their commitment is regenerates or infuses ours as well. It's a wonderful collaboration emerging. So, Jonathan, we'd be thrilled with you beginning with questions, comments, probings, whatever's on your mind.
Well, I think this is amazing. And one of the things that's amazing is that it starts with a worldview. And particularly panpsychism, pantheism, animism, etc. And these are worlds views that that life permeates, that life is fully permeating, and consciousness are fully permeating in existence, and not just in humans or in even in animals. And it's an essential worldview. But then this takes you all the way through the steps to Earth law, which is actually, what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to actually take this new worldview and implement it into the world? And so I just want you to know that that's the reason why I love this. And Tyler and Mary Evelyn, you just told that journey so very completely and efficiently and effectively. So number one, I thank you for that. So one of the questions is about this idea of Earth law. See, the person asks, so when and where do the rights of rivers trump the rights of dams? Now, I just want to back up and say that ever since, and I can't pronounce the name of the river, but in New Zealand, it was given personhood. So the first thing that, by the way, I'll make a little comment, which is when I found that out, I thought, we're diminishing a river to personhood? Like, we should be expanding, our, like, riverhood should be so much bigger than personhood. But unfortunately, we give corporations purposehood. So if, if trillion-dollar corporations have personhood, at least rivers should have, and nature should have personhood. But since then, all over the world and all over America, so the citizens, the people who border on Lake Erie gave Lake Erie personhood. In Florida, in the middle of Florida, conservative Florida, people have given their local rivers and wetlands personhood. And so this is rapidly growing. So I think the question is then, okay, once you've granted a river personhood, can it say no to a dam? How's that work?
It's such a great question. If you don't mind, I'll start.
Go for it.
What a pleasure, as you can see, to have intergenerational work and collaboration here. So I remember years ago when Secretary Babbitt came to a conference in Boston, and he said, I'm going up to Maine to de-dam a river. And it could have been even 20 years ago. It was quite amazing and electrifying for the conference to hear. And I think this is a very important question. What are the trade-offs and so on? But when you have dammed so many rivers as we have in this country, when you have almost extinguished salmon and migration patterns, which are some of the most amazing in the world, to be born in one place in a river, to spawn, go all the way out to the ocean, come back to the same place, is that intelligences, etc.? So there's a wonderful film I would recommend, The Elwha River De-Damming, and what it has done for that river in bringing back life all around the river, in the river, et cetera. Very, very inspiring. Missy Lauren helped to make that. And this movement of de-damming that is unstoppable, because what we're trying to do is one of the greatest energy transitions in human history, clearly. It's a modern transition. But as we go towards effective and economically viable and scalable alternative energies, the damming of rivers is not going to be as essential as it was earlier on. And native peoples have a lot to say about this because it has so degraded their fishing, their forests, etc. So in everything in this environmental movement that many of us are involved in or care about, there are going to be trade-offs. Nothing is perfect. And this is part of where we have to get over the black and white. But is a river alive? If you read that book of Rob McFarlane, whose son says to him walking along as he's writing it, Dad, of course they're alive. Everyone knows the power of rivers and what they do for a whole ecosystem. Now, Tyler, you may want to add to that.
Sure. Just a quick thought about relationships here. Relationships to rivers, the rivers' relationships to salmon and other migrating fish species, but also the human relationship to rivers. Yeah. And when I think of New Zealand, you mentioned the river there, the Wanganui. There's a legal recognition of rights, but these rights were recognized as being inherently within the river by the local indigenous peoples, the Maori, who have this centuries-long, millennia-long relationship to the river. And so what Earth jurisprudence and these rights of nature movements are also doing is allowing for custodianship between indigenous peoples and the rivers that we might hear the roar of the rapids, but so many of us don't understand what the river is communicating in its health and its ecosystem vitality. And so just relationships is really what we're talking about here. And what the Living Earth community is also doing is bridging these conversations between science, law, ecological philosophies and spiritualities, so that we can begin to learn how to communicate, how to interact with the more than human. And so just wanted to represent this idea of custodianship that I personally do not have an answer to your question, Jonathan, but I trust that there are others who know these rivers and ecosystems so much more intimately than myself, who would have so much more to say.
So the answer in part is that when rivers are granted personhood, in a way they're put in trust and they're custodians for the trust, and very often these are including indigenous people or people holding indigenous values, and that then gives them the right to sue. So and the suing is within the current world, like unfortunately they're suing in the 18th, 19th, 20th century legal system. They're not suing within the panpsychic legal system. But it gives them more rights, and there have been some efficacy. So I want to tell a story, and I've unfortunately blanking on the name of the tribe and the name of the exact city, but I think it's outside of Minneapolis in that Midwestern Lakes area, in which the treaty with the local tribe had said that they would forever have the right to harvest wild rice, and which is a sacred thing, but also food way for them. And in the 1970s, they started suing for this right, which was being abused, and ultimately won the right. And by the way, and this is, they harvest in a traditional way with canoes, and to perfect the right, had to close down the steel plants, clean up that, and it ended up being declared a Superfund site, and billions of dollars was spent cleaning up this ecosystem so that they could have their right to harvest rice. And from the point of economic efficiency, maybe that didn't make sense, but I think that's the entirely wrong point of view. From the point of view of the sacredness of life and the restoration of an ecosystem, it was an amazing leverage point to be able to restore an ecosystem. So it's complicated. These are not perfect solutions, but they start. I'm going to read another question, which is building on this. When and where do the flowery words of Ivory Tower meet the reality of life, jobs, and communities on the ground in the present time, Give me some examples. So we've started giving some examples to that question. But I want to
Can you
challenge.
repeat that question a
Yeah,
little
and
bit?
then I'm going to challenge the question. So the
Okay.
question is, where and when do the flowery words of Ivory Tower meet the reality of life, jobs, and communities on the ground in the present time? So I would say these are not just these are not flowery words of the Ivory Tower. These are the words, the poetic words of the true nature of the world. And that we actually have constructed an economic system that is the false nature of the world. And the evidence of that is that, people are obese and dying of cancer, and that the current economic structure is not delivering such well-being and happiness. It's delivering increasing uncertainty. And what happens is that when you design real communities, so by the way, I want to do a shout out. I notice on our audience list is Martin Ping. And so if you go to Hawthorne Valley Farm and Hawthorne Schools, the whole Hawthorne system, you can see how much well-being and community and jobs and life and ecological worldview can actually bring a community, and therefore in a way that is much more stable, much less volatile, much less vulnerable to the arbitrariness of the economic system. So,
Indeed.
Tyler or Mary Evelyn, do you have something more to answer on that?
Well, yeah, and I'll give a shout out to John Fullerton's new book, a mutual friend here, Regenerative Economics. He worked for many years on Wall Street, JP Morgan, and got extremely disillusioned with a system that is ravaging the planet. And, Peter Raven of the Missouri Botanical Gardens wrote at least 30 years ago, we are killing our world. And right now, the UN Secretary General said just a day ago, the GDP does not measure well-being or life systems. And he's doing a whole report with Stiglitz and others who have been saying this for a very, very long time. Our economic system is undermining our ecological system. Thomas Berry, Herman Daly, many others have said for years, our economic system is a subsystem of our ecological system. So this is by way of saying, along what Jonathan just said, this is hardly ivory tower. Everything we do has, yes, 1 foot in academia and probably a big footprint outside of academia, because that's what we care about. The well-being, life of people. Are people in Flint, Michigan feeling water is alive? No. The amount of pollution around this country, Cancer Alley in Louisiana, and so on, this has enormous implications for how people live once we renew and respect and revere the life systems which support all of life. I'll just end by saying this is fundamentally about food, water, health, and children. That's what this website is offering in many ways. A sense of the future depends on the health of the biosphere.
Yeah. Something that Mary Evelyn said, that the economic system is undermining the ecological system. And I would drop the under, just say the economic is mining the ecological. It's extracting, it's alienating, it's treating the more than human world as a utility value, something that is lifeless and somehow unlimited on a finite planet. But to get back to the question, I think of our friends at NYU Law and the Moth program, where they are keenly aware of their place within a large academic institution. And what they've been doing is deliberately developing relationships with communities around the world, especially in Latin America, where so much of this earth law and rights of nature work is being done. We think of Ecuador, who in 2008 was the first nation on earth to amend its constitution to recognize the rights of Pachamama, Mother Earth. And so what moth folks are doing is having this handshake of sorts between the ivory tower, these institutions with vast amounts of resources and power and relationships, but opening that up and building these long-term values-driven relationships with communities who are on the ground, who they're not reading a paper about the loss of an Amazonian stingless bee species. They know it because they're seeing their food systems wane. And so something that we're trying to do with the Living Earth community is to build this long-term vision of reciprocal relationships that Robin Wall Kimmerer speaks so much about, and many others, and to share what we have available and make that accessible to so many others who are doing this very important work. And so our website is one offering of that sort.
And by the way, it's saying human exceptionalism, that we're the only thinking, reflecting creatures, conscious creatures on the planet, is a huge problem of modernity. And that is the healing that this knowledge commons is offering. Everything is alive. Bioneers has been saying this a long time, the program in the Bay Area that's been having conferences for years and years. Everything is alive. Everything is kin. That is a new worldview, as Jonathan said a few moments ago, which will be a healing for the exploitation that is killing the planet, frankly.
So it's actually an old worldview.
Yes, exactly.
And it's so interesting because the questions show the uncertainty about this. So another question is, it wasn't from an earlier time, but who or what authority grants the rights to rivers? So what we've said is it's within the contemporary law system, but within that system, you create a trusteeship so that the river at least has a voice in the discussion about it. And in previously, whether it was overfished or dams were built or all the trees around it were cut or whatever, it had no voice. So at least it's in the conversation. And then the question was, and how do human rights get factored into this equation? And actually, what's interesting about the example I gave about the harvesting of the rice was that those were human rights. So absolutely, humans are part of the living system. And by the way, humans as gardeners, humans in many indigenous cultures, the way the humans deal with the ecosystems actually enhances its health. So humans are not all just bad forces. The goal is to have them be more balanced forces. And if it's done right, it improves the well-being of the humans too. It's a win-win. You know, Janine Benyus said that life creates the conditions conducive to life. And if you hold that kind of as your motto, like, how am I going to create the conditions human to life? It's human life. It's all species life. It's the very force of life. And if you can optimize for that, then you're on the right path.
Well, exactly. And these are good questions. I think it's very important. We're not trying to be naive optimists here. As I said, I was amazed that Thomas suggested this at the very end of his life. But the amazing thing is having traction well beyond what we would have believed. And here's one example of the connection, is that many states are taking up the right to a healthy environment is a human right. Connecticut has this moving through its system right now. And this is in other parts of the world too. It's in the frame of ecocide. What we're doing is ecocide. And where is the human right to a healthy environment, well-being of humans and well-being of the biosphere? We're saying it over and over again, but these are not mutually exclusive. And they are moving through legal systems fairly rapidly, of the right to a healthy environment. And that's part of the rights of the children's trust, the various legal cases about climate change, and that it's infringing on their future. These are very powerful cases. We just weighed in with one of the newest ones and having people sign on board. These young people, they're not going to be stopped either. This is their right to a future that's not just sustainable, but flourishing.
So somebody else writes, I'm glad to see various declarations on the website. In this year of US celebrating its 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, I think it's an ideal opportunity to provide a vision for the next 250 years. The Declaration of Interdependence could provide that. David Suzuki has an excellent example on his website. The Earth Charter provides a vital framework for putting that vision into action. Your website seems like a huge step in that direction. And so it is wonderful that, like, I didn't know there was a New York State. This is why your website's so valuable. I didn't know there was a New York State Declaration of Consciousness going on. So what do you think about either the Earth Charter or a meta declaration of declarations? And then after you're done, I have a point of view about this 250th anniversary. But how do you propose to respond to the 250th anniversary?
Such a great question. Right on the same page. I say often in talks and so on, and in writing, we have a Declaration of Independence. We have 200 years of an Enlightenment period, which elevated the human, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, none of which took into account the community of life. It's all
Right.
about the individual. And so we've come to, it's a very important shift in human consciousness, isn't it? No one wants to give up independence, but without interdependence, we are fragmented societies. We are, as Jonathan said, there's illness, there's alienation. Our students are deeply, deeply in states of eco-anxiety, of dis-ease, and so on. Again, there's no question that the Earth Charter, which took almost 10 years to write, and being part of that drafting committee with 25 others from around the world, was an extraordinary experience because people knew on very deep levels that something more was needed besides hyper-individualism. And when Gorbachev in 1992, along with Maurice Strong, a Canadian business person who chaired the Earth Summit in 92, that the first President Bush said, why would we go? We don't want to give up our way of life. Let's think about that in terms of hyper-consumption, hyper-individualism. But that, what Gorbachev was saying, we needed 10 commandments for environment and development to adjudicate these very complex issues. And that's what we're still into. So I'll stop, otherwise I'll go on and on, because I do think the Earth Charter, with ecology, as it's the integrity of ecosystems, justice, economic and social justice, the inner part, and democracy, nonviolence, and peace. Ecology, justice, and peace are the way into the future. And that is what the Earth Charter offers.
Sure. Now I'll say a quick word about declarations in general. I love this idea of a declaration of interdependence. That's a great view for the next 250 years of this country. But declarations, I've learned from those who are drafting them, is a mechanism to work within existing systems, to challenge them, to gauge the barometric pressure of the conversation, but also to push the conversation in the direction of rights language. What I have in mind is the Declaration for the Rights of Antarctica. There's been no more than 4,000 humans living on Antarctica at one time. And yet there's a coalition of legal scholars and scientists from around the world who are representing this movement to recognize the inherent rights of Antarctica as a landscape. They even describe it as a living being of sorts in this declaration, but they recognize all of the more than human life that exists, from the microscopic and bacterial within the ice, all the way up to the many different mammal species. And here again, we see that interdependence being recognized in the declaration. If mining or mineral extraction or militarization of Antarctic land were to occur, well, that would accelerate the melting of the ice caps, that would accelerate the calving of glaciers, and so much more, which would affect coastlines around the world. predominantly communities who were least involved, least responsible for this type of ideological work, but who will face the brunt of the consequences. And so again, declarations, this is still in a draft, but the drafters are seeing this as a way of pushing forward conversation bit by bit so that we can, again, be viewing the more than human as part of the community that we ourselves exist within.
Totally. Thank you.
So I just want to take this conversation in a different direction, which is that I think it's ridiculous. Ridiculous is the wrong word. The Declaration of Independence is a wonderful thing, but I think we should declare ourselves to be a 30,000-year-old nation. And why does our nation's history start with its European invasion? I think by the way, we are a nation of immigrants. The original immigrants came here somewhere between 18 and 30,000 years ago. But we have this incredible history of life and cultures in this land in North America. And I think it'd be great to acknowledge them all and to say we're an ancient country, not we're a new country, we're an ancient country. But anyway, so I would be reapproaching this whole 250th.
I love that. It's exactly right. And seeing things in deep time is what you're also offering us, right?
Yeah.
Deep time gives a different perspective than our 250 year. Yes, it's going to be an important anniversary, but interdependence is the only way of the future. Life for only humans? I don't think so. Liberty without responsibilities, the pursuit of happiness without considering the community. These have been necessary but insufficient and need change. That's the exciting moment that we're in. And the deep time that Jonathan has just offered is a great addition to rethinking.
So you know what? You could just expand those words. So this is probably would be an interesting blog maybe we should write. So life, you expanded all of life, and that's sufficient. Liberty. So what's so beautiful about evolution is it is its own form of liberty and constraints. Obviously, it exists when the constraints of causes and conditions and the effects of things upon everything, then interdependence. But within the realm of interdependence, it has the evolutionary freedom to fill the nooks and crannies and open the cracks and kind of go where it's going to go. And the pursuit of happiness, we know that from all modern science now, that the true pursuit of happiness is, not another social media blog, another social media like posted, but it's about deep relationality, and that happiness emerges from relationship. And so anyway, I think you could take pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's just one more thing, in David Graeber and I forgot the other guy's name, amazing book, The Dawn of Everything.
Right.
They tell this incredible story of where did these ideas initially come from, and they came from the French encounter with the Anishinaabe and the Canadian Native Indigenous Americans. And when they came, the Indigenous Americans said to them, hey, we're completely free. You follow all these, you get bossed around by your superiors, and they have all these laws, and they punish you and they fine you if you don't do things. They're like, we're just free. We just do what we need to do. And you're always cheating and stealing from each other and going behind each other's back. And we treat each other like brothers. We just treat each other in full relationship. And, you guys have to get drunk to get happy or something like that. And we just live in the realm of happiness. And anyway, the bottom line is that equality, liberty, and fraternity, he claims, came from these encounters with the indigenous people in America. And that's really where those ideas came from. So I'm going to go to another, it's a question statement. Much of Mary Evelyn's wonderful work invites us into relationship with nature at a civilization scale. if we brought the scale down to the level of the town, the watershed, or the bioregion, what might a public theology of nature look like in practice? By the way, this question's from Steve Varley. So, Mary Evelyn, what might a
Steve
public
who?
Steve Varley of the Garrison Institute is
Okay.
asking,
Thank you,
what might
Steve.
a public theology of nature look like in practice?
Well, it's true. One part of our work is on ecological civilization as China has developed, and we're going to be doing a series with Garrison of 5 webinars on that topic to continue what we did with Garrison this past year. So, but I do think what Steve is saying, and many of you on this call would be responding to, all of this has to be built into the bioregion, which is why Garrison is looking at the Hudson Valley and is exploring what does community look like in one of the most amazing watersheds on the East Coast. It's just extraordinary watershed. I grew up in this region, in the southern part of the Hudson River. And so to have, bioregionalism began with Kirkpatrick Sale so many years ago, right? And Thomas Berry wrote an article on the Hudson River as bioregion, which is in Dream of the Earth in 1988, but he wrote it much earlier than that. So he recognized and appreciated the bioregional conferences that took place in the Midwest and so on, Peter Berg and others who led these movements. And I think the freshness of Martin Ping and the Hawthorne Farm and the school and what is being done there is exactly exemplifying what community relationality means. There's no question. And there's also a group along the Hudson River, which is called ROAR, and it's the different religious groups along the river trying to look after its health and well-being, et cetera. So bioregionalism, I think, is having a revival. It's extremely important. And even if it's not the whole river, what does it mean to live in community and create a township, fellowship, careship, especially for children and the next generation? Everything we're doing is for the next generation. We don't have children, but our students and now our colleagues are our children. And that is what I think our collective work is all about, all of you on this webinar. It's the next generations, isn't it?
And I want to pick up on another roar you mentioned.
Yeah.
Earlier, I spoke about the class in Durango, Colorado, and they also have termed themselves ROAR, Rights of Animas River. And Juniper Lee is the senior at Fort Lewis College who we co-hosted the webinar with. And I think they really modeled this, what the question is getting at. How do we act locally while we are seeking to transform social norms and even civilizational ways of being? Well, building relationships with river, with one another, with different neighbors. And to Mary Evelyn's point, this intergenerational aspect is so key. They didn't really need permission to go do it. They could have just gone and done this on their own. But they recognize that there's wisdom in different generations. There's wisdom in relationality. And so, again, just acting locally in community, developing deep, rich, self-giving relationships, and then trusting that if these seeds are sown in many different bioregions, something's going to emerge on a larger scale.
Definitely.
You know what? We're coming close to the end of our time. One of the things that I'd love to do, there's like the chats are just, the questions are just opening up with all kinds of beautiful questions. So here's what I'd like to suggest. So first of all, if somebody has written something or that they'd like others to read, or has a reference to something they'd like to read, put it in the chat. So I'm going to suggest we all hang out for, and we can keep talking, but for like another 5 minutes, but I want to give people time to do this. If you have something that you want to, like many people want to share things with you, Mary Evelyn, or with me, or the Garrison Institute. So put them in the chat so that everybody can see them. And there are also many wonderful thank yous that are coming in the question and answer time too. Um, and references, for example, somebody references Mark Carney's, the Canadian Prime Minister's book on values. Um, somebody is says they tried to write an article called "A New Myth: A Frame of Reference Orientation." So let's share all these wonderful writings and ideas with everybody. Um, and so while we're inviting our audience to do that, Tyler, is there a way you'd like to bring this to a close?
The way that I would like to bring it to a close, with gratitude, absolutely with gratitude for this opportunity to have this conversation and for so many people to show up today. I would also like to extend gratitude to the Earth community and encourage one another to explore what it means to be grateful, to be thankful, and to express that to the more than human world around us. To the stand of trees who are exchanging breath with our own bodies, to the bacterial biome in our own gut, keeping us alive as we also sustain their life. So just a note of gratitude and exploring what a radical approach to gratitude might look like in this time of broken relationships and many challenges that our communities are facing.
That's so beautiful. If I could just pick up on that, because I see my wonderful husband, John Grimm, has affirmed Jonathan Rose's point, and it's the White Earth Anishinaabe people who have preserved the wild rice. And of course, Winona LaDuke was a real leader in that effort. And I want to give the shout out to pick up on gratitude, because we are in this period, I think, aren't we, of breakdown to break through. And it's Native peoples have shown us not only in their life ways of living that John has studied so many years with Thomas Berry and with Native peoples in Montana and in the Pacific Northwest. And we've been to many reservations. And the gratitude that I feel is the endurance of people living on the land, keeping their community alive, keeping rituals alive, like the Sundance, like peyote rituals, and so on, against great odds and with enormous oppression. So it's that spirit of resilience, of kinship and relationality that was underneath this offering of Living Earth community. May they flourish. May we learn from them and all those who've preceded us.
Thank you, Mary Evelyn. Thank you, John. And we're going to leave the chat open. And Monique, it'd be great if we could actually then send all the things in the chat, kind of capture them and send them around to the email list of the people who joined us today. We really appreciate everybody who did join us. Just a reminder, on February 18th, Mary Evelyn, you're doing another webinar with us. You're one of our rock stars. And so our virtual forums are free of charge, but we love it when people donate. And so you can go to www.garrisonnews.org, give, and click on donate and be as generous as you can be. And visit our calendar for a full list of upcoming programs. I also have a podcast called The Common Good. You can just search for Garrison Institute podcasts and you'll see that. And we thank you all for coming.
If I could say one thing about the February 18th, this is a PhD graduate of our School of the Environment, Gao Yufang, and he has worked in China. He is Chinese, obviously, but he's worked in Tibet with the conservation of mammals along the lines of what Peter Matheson has documented and so on, of these great, beautiful species. He is one of the great young leaders of conservation, of biodiversity, and learning from Tibetan monks how to do this. So we really invite you to that February 18th discussion with Gao Yufang.
So check it all out. I got to run. Love you all. Bye.
Thank you, Jonathan, so much. Thank you. Thank you, Garrison.